Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Ben and I'm a self-taught web developer who went from zero to paid full stack in 8 months studying the Odin project. And in today's video, I just wanted to reflect on the last couple years of software engineering experience that I have now as a professional and let you know, was it all worth it? So a little bit of the backstory. I'm self-taught and I come from a decade in another career, specifically in natural resources management. So I went to school, got a bachelor's degree, I got a master's degree. So I was heavily invested in this particular field, and then I started working in natural resources and water management. I did a couple years in the private industry, and then I got a job in government and worked my way up to a senior level where I was doing management, kind of managing a small team of people, working on the day-to-day stuff, and really enjoyed my work. It was tough, it was challenging, but there were things that made me want to leave. And when you say government, generally people are like, oh, government. And there's reasons for that. So I'd been there for 7 years, all told, and I started to notice that people who had been there for 7 or more years, usually around the 8, 9 plus, they just became lackluster. They were no longer really engaged in their work. They just found a steady state rhythm and they just hit the ball over the net every single day, and that was that. They showed up, went to work, didn't really do much more than that than they had to. There was not very much passion. There was not very much sort of novel thinking or, let's say, ingenuity or excitement for trying to do something different to solve this problem in a different way. It was very much just the same, rather banal. And there were lots of people who, in the positions above me where I was looking up towards to progress to, they were just not happy. Mid-level management, they were just stressed, overworked, dealing with a lot of people issues, dealing with the unions and all that kind of stuff. And that was enough for me to be like, I don't want that, and I need to do something different. I'd always been interested in tech. Software engineering in general had always piqued my interest. And when I was in university, in my master's degree in Montreal, my good friend was studying Ruby on Rails back in about 2012. And this was kind of in its, when it was really growing to its peak. And I was like, what is this stuff he's doing? It seems crazy. I'm going to school and get my degree, and this is a far more secure way to go about things. But I was wrong. I was pleasantly surprised when over time he started getting work, these contracts, growing in his experience level, and eventually he was out-earning every single one of us in our friend group. And I was like, wow, this is very impressive. And so I'd always had in the back of my mind, this is a potential path I could take, but I never really had enough of a kicker or an incentive to do it until I just reached a point where I was like, I have to do something because I don't want to end up like them. So I started studying very hard via the Odin project, and it took me 8 months, and I got my first role as an intern. Worked there for 8 months at FreshBooks. Fantastic experience working in Python, actually, not Ruby on Rails. And then I got a job at a B2B e-commerce platform. It was a very small company, three developers basically, including the founder. That was in Ruby on Rails. But it was very slow to the point where I wasn't growing. I was growing, but I wasn't growing very quickly. And to give you context, when I left there, I had 22 pull requests up for review. And so there was a bottleneck in that whole review process. The founder was reviewing all the code. And it was, I didn't really have a senior, let's say, who I could learn from, who could actively sort of give me time and invest in me. I was just learning by myself, but I don't think you learn as quickly that way. So I wanted a bit more mentorship. So I went to another company that was also a small Ruby on Rails shop where there were about 5-6 developers. And it was a much more fast-paced, much more rapid development environment to the point where I could barely keep up, and I was actually very stressed. And I always felt like I was just struggling to stay afloat, to the point where I felt like burnout was inevitable working at that pace. And it also just felt like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze in terms of the pay and stock options they promised you. I'd been there almost a year and I'd not even heard a single thing about the stock options that I was promised. So I was like, these things don't smell very good, so I need to look elsewhere, somewhere with a better work-life balance and decent pay. And I found that role in what I'm doing now, and I'm very happy in the company that I've landed at. And To compare it to my old career, because fundamentally that's really what I need to do in order to determine if it was the right move, I would say that I'm just as happy where I'm at now, because I was decently happy in my past career. But one of the bigger differences now, which is very nice, is that at a senior level in the government, I was earning less than I am at a sort of mid-level now as a developer. So my path forward as an independent contributor is got so much more legs, so much more room and potential for growth than I had in my old career. And that's what I really like. And that's true from both a salary perspective, but also from a personal growth perspective as well. Because in many careers, in many disciplines that you can enter into, they are not as broad or as wide as software. Software is extremely broad. There is no end to what you can learn and invest your time in. And from that perspective, it's an industry where you always have to constantly be learning because things are always evolving and changing. You can't really stay static. And that just means as a person, as an individual in your career, you're always having to grow. And this is also a very nice thing to have. But the big thing for me is the fact that my earning potential is so much greater working in software. And then there are other things. The people in software, the culture in software, I really do enjoy, especially compared to government. And I'm talking about software in private companies. You can go and work in the government and software as well. And, this might not hold as true, but generally people in software are more willing to speak up, more willing to speak out when things don't quite look right. They're willing to stand by let's say their beliefs, but what they can prove, what they believe to be right, but also what the data shows to be right as well. And I think that that's a very refreshing thing after coming from government where everyone's kind of too scared to speak up because everyone's stepping on people's toes and everyone has to be nice to everybody. You don't really get ahead that way. You don't evolve that way. It's nice when somebody or a culture celebrates people who are focused on solving the problem the best way they can, not necessarily other people's feelings. And that's not to say you got to run into the room and be an asshole about it. Obviously, there are tactful ways to approach certain conversations when you don't agree with somebody. Obviously, you got to be tactful. But the whole point of having that conversation is so that everybody improves, so that the product that you're working on improves, so that the end user experience improves. Right? It's the underlying improvement that's driving all of these conversations. So in the government context, there was no such thing as that really. You might argue there was, but it was very few and far between. That's what I really like about working software is the culture, and then also there is a very strong culture of work-life balance in tech. I mean, I think maybe 10 years ago it was even more shiny because you had ping pong tables, you had catered lunches, you had sleep pods, and these big companies, and tech was kind of given this really shiny luster, allure thing where it was just like, wow, tech's so cool. Look at all these people, it's so chill. That does carry through into tech companies. I've seen it in a couple companies that I've worked at where people do value you as a human. They are willing to give you time off if you need it. They don't push you too hard. If providing you land in the right company, you can find this, which is also very similar in government. The work-life balance was very, very good. However, what I love about working in the tech field is that people are still hungry, they're still willing to grow, and at the end of the day, it's a private company, so you're held accountable, you have to produce. You can't just sit there and do nothing and get paid at the end of the day because you won't last very long. It's a good, healthy culture. I think it's a good, healthy mix of we respect you as a human, but obviously as a worker, you gotta show up and do the work. And I think that's a good place to be in when you are yourself hungry and driven. Now, within this almost 3 years I've been a software developer, we've had 2 kids now, so a busy time. And that's why I'm valuing more the work-life balance side of things. If I was younger, I'd probably be more interested in something a bit more scrappy, something that maybe has the chance to go from startup to something bigger, where you can earn bigger as well if things go well and you get options and there's buyouts, etc. But right now, the more relaxed approach to work is exactly what I need. It gives me more time to focus on the family, have energy to play around with the kids and all that good stuff. It's a scary prospect to go from one career to another, and it really does depend on what your current or past career is as to whether or not going into software is going to make it worthwhile. But I do think in most cases, you're going to get paid more than a career that you're in. Maybe if you're a high-end lawyer or doctor or something like that, that's not going to be the case. But based on the numbers and the statistics, software is going to pay better than most other industries that people are coming from. So from that perspective, it's a very nice benefit to making that switch. It's also culturally, I think, generally a healthy place to be. Depends on the company that you land at, though. Like I said, I've landed at companies where it was not healthy. It was not a healthy culture, and it's more of a focus on producing code and get this work done, or you're underperforming. So be very mindful of the kind of company that you might land at. Ask the right questions in your interviews to really get a sense of how people are treated and what the whole expectations look like for the given company. And just as an aside here, I've worked in 4 companies now, and 3 of them I made very good lasting relationship with my colleagues, and I would still talk to them now, even several years later. And in these companies, they valued the human, and you were not pressured too much to do the work. In the one company where I was pressured very heavily to do a lot of work, I didn't make a single strong connection with my employees. So that kind of tells you about the culture, right? And I think your experience in tech is going to be very dependent on the kind of culture that you land in. So, like I said, do your homework. Make sure you can go on review sites like Glassdoor. There's a couple of others. You can Google them. I can't remember their names, but there are some decent ones for tech that might give you a better perspective of what the culture is like in a company. Though they can be jaded by people who've just had a bad experience. So the best thing you can do is really reach out to current employees while you're thinking about a given company, especially if you've been given an offer, and ask them what it's like. They are the best source of evidence. Even current and past employees would be the best kind of barometer I think you can get from that. But overall, very, very happy with the switch. Intellectually, it's such a great, refreshing challenge. It's so nice to be in an environment where every day you're working on something that you have no idea at the onset how you're going to solve this, and then you solve it. It's such a rewarding experience, and then seeing that going into production and seeing end users using it and getting feedback on that, it is a rewarding iterative experience. I really like that part of it. I find that people are very supportive. You'll have questions. Everybody's in a sort of group learning mindset, willing to support each other. That's very healthy. And overall, you have a lot more options in software. So coming from the career that I was in, locally, there were a few jobs. Working in government, you're really only building capacity to work in government. So if you don't want to work in government anymore, you're kind of screwed. And the further you go down that 5, 10, 15 years, the harder it is to pull out. In software, I've worked at 4 different companies in the last almost 3 years. Now, the company I'm at now, I intend to stay at because I've found somewhere that I'm finally like, okay, this is what I wanted. I'm going to grow and invest here. And you have options, however. In software, it's a skill set that's going to be transferable. And there are so many companies that require developers and software engineers that you can come along and find new jobs. Obviously, that gets easier with the more experience that you gain. You got to crack that egg at first, and getting your first job is the hardest. And sometimes you might have to make concessions in that role. Give it time, invest in yourself, gain experience, and eventually you will find it opens up a little more where you can find that company that gives you exactly what you want. And that would be very hard for me to do in my past career. Anyway, that's it. That's my thoughts. That's summing it up. 0 regrets. Very happy I made the transition. I got a lot more career growth ahead of me. A lot of people in my age right now, they are seniors, mid-level managers in their first career. I've made a complete switch where I had to go back to junior, and now I'm kind of mid-level, working my way up towards senior in a couple years. But my goodness, I earn way more money than people who are, or as much money as a junior level as seniors in other fields. And so my earning potential is going to be so much greater. And money is important because, you know, you want to pay your house off. You don't want to, you want to be able to invest. You want to be able to retire. You don't want to have to rely on a government pension at the end of the day, if you can help it, right? Money is a good thing because it gives you options in life. So I really like that about it too. Anyone else who switched careers? Very curious to see whether or not you, on the whole, would say it was a positive experience. I would imagine most people would. It's not for everybody though. It is very challenging to make that switch, and you may get into software and realize it's just not something that you like. But I would wager that most people coming from most careers who have gone through the self-taught route, who've gotten good enough to actually be hired, kind of filtering out people who don't enjoy writing code, they would say it's probably well worth it. So yeah, stick to it and good luck. See you in the next one.